Hello and welcome to this all-new episode of the Fairfax Sports Report. I'm your host, Monica Moore, and we have an action-packed episode for you tonight. We've been off for a while, and so we have all of the updates about all of the ongoing winter sports. But before we get into all of that, we want to talk about a couple of news and notes, things that have been going on in the region while we have been off. But let's thank the folks that helped make this show possible. Our good friends at CCI Screen Printing for all of your screen printing needs at 703-978-0257. And don't forget to check us out on the web. You see our website there, www.fairfaxsportsnetwork.com. All right, so now let's talk about some of those news and notes that I promised to get into. A lot of football news and notes. First of all, congratulations to a couple of Stonebridge football players. We talked during the fall about how 5 members of this year's Stonebridge football team had committed to play at college: Patrick Thompson, Zach Thompson, Mike Olson, David Wang, and Brian Slay. Well, over the Christmas holidays, a couple of more Stonebridge players have committed to play at the next level. So first of all, congratulations to Daniel Allen. He's going to be playing at James Madison next year. And then also, congratulations to Trevor Springman, who is going to be playing at William and Mary. Sticking with the football news and notes, unfortunately, Bill Renner has resigned from West Springfield's football team as being their head coach. Of course, I say unfortunately because he's one of our favorite coaches in the Northern region, but the reason that he has resigned is because he's hoping to watch his son Bren compete next year at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, where Bren's going to be playing football and baseball. Bren was also a basketball player over at West Springfield, but he's decided to take the basketball season off so he can focus on football and baseball. Of course, Bill Renner has been on the sidelines in Fairfax County for 20 years. He started out 5 years at Mount Vernon, then spent 5 years at Langley, finishing up 10 years at West Springfield, and he had 101 wins in his coaching career on the Fairfax County sidelines. So we are definitely going to miss Bill Renner, but good luck to him and good luck to Bren. Now, I also want to give you an injury update about Chris Coyer, the Oakton quarterback. A lot of people in the region know that he was injured during Oakton's semifinal state game against Oscar Smith. He had a cracked vertebrae close to his neck, but we've heard from the people over at Oakton that he's going to be fine. In fact, he's hoping to rejoin his Oakton basketball team later on this season. Oakton's been struggling a little bit, so certainly they're going to be very happy to get Chris Coyer back. Now, finally, I want to talk about one final news and note. And of course, one of the big things that people in the region have been talking about is the proposed budget cuts for 2010. Now, several sports have been talked about. Gymnastics and indoor track amongst them is perhaps being cut if the school needs the money. Tonight is one of the first of the public hearings where people in Fairfax County can go and express their opinions to the Fairfax County School Board. And one interesting thing about this is Fairfax County, the school board, put up on their website time slots that you could sign up for. There were 120 time slots available. They were filled in 2 hours. So people in the region very upset, very interested in this topic. And so the final decisions will be made around May. Well, speaking of some of those sports and indoor track in particular, we are delighted to be joined tonight by TC Williams' indoor and outdoor track coach, Marshall Edmonds. Welcome, Coach. We're glad to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Now, your team always has so many dynamic athletes, and of course, you competed this past weekend at a quad meet with South Lakes and Stuart and Marshall. What were some of the highlights of that meet?
Well, one was to have the boys and girls both come away with a victory. It's the first time we were able to double up between both programs. We were happy with the ability, the performances of some of our younger athletes who we felt as though they were what we say on the bubble, but they broke through the bubble this weekend. They performed excellent. Now, of course, we have districts within 10 to 15 days, so the nerves are starting to be a little frayed with some of the younger athletes because they're very nervous of the level of the districts. But I think the program is ready to show and shine at the districts this year.
Now, speaking of some of these younger athletes, I know you had some good numbers amongst the 9th graders coming out to participate. Who are some of the upcoming athletes that we should be looking at that may in future years be the future of TC Williams?
Well, actually, because TC is in a unique situation, we're allowed to have 8th graders on the team.
Oh, I didn't know
that.
Now,
they cannot score, so they always run JV. But I have we have a young lady named Shabani Dickens. Keep an eye out for this one. She is an 8th grader, and she, at this point, her time is the 3rd to 4th fastest on the team
Oh my goodness.
as a 13-year-old. And she's only going to get better. And we have Morgan Latilde, who is a phenomenal 300, 500 runner, once again, an 8th grader. So they've been those diamonds in the rough that we didn't even know that we were going to have, that week by week are performing at a high level.
Well, one question I was going to ask you is, I know with a lot of the other sports, there are junior high teams that they participate on. I didn't know if there was anything like that for indoor track, or how the interest gets generated amongst the younger children in the county and the middle school students, such that when they get to high school, they're interested in participating in indoor track.
Well, fortunately, in Alexandria, there's a summer track program, and it's actually utilized via Episcopal. They tend to train over there in the summer. And I met the summer coach in passing this summer, and she's the one that told me that, oh, I know your kids. I had them when they were 7 years old. I don't know, because I'm not from the region. I live in Maryland, but I coach here, and I didn't know that it was such a small, it's not a well-known program, the Alexandria Titan program, Summer Rec League, but so many great athletes have came out of there, so I'm very appreciative of what they've done, because other counties don't always have that as available to them, a summer program.
And speaking of great athletes, you can't talk about T.C. Williams track without talking about Tinita Butts, who has been sensational throughout all of her 4 years here in Alexandria. Now, last year, as you know, I watched her compete and was very impressed by her. How do you think she's improved from last year to this year?
Mentally. Physically, I think as long as you keep away from the shin splints, I'm a former long jumper, and as a jumper, it's a very physically demanding event. And she does both jumps, high and long, so your shins will give in sometimes. You have to take a break. So I think she's mentally dealing with it better this year. She knows how to plan within the coach's plans for how to handle the week of practice in preparation for the meet. And be it that we're right on the cusp of districts, we know that at times you have to shut an athlete down a little bit to prep them, and then look at maybe this meet is one we should sit out a little bit and make sure you're 100% ready to roll, because last year at districts, that was yeoman's work, that she was not just in four events, she won 4 events, and that's a rarity. And not that we're putting that pressure on her again, but we know that it's a possibility. And you want all of your athletes to be the best they possibly can be, especially at that crunch time.
I did read in an article that at the Christopher Newport meet, she was competing in the long jump and perhaps thinking about the 55 and other events she had coming up and wanting to conserve a little bit. And so you kind of have to make those judgment calls, I think, on the day of competition. Do you think that's been an issue, or?
No, I smiled at your comment, because I read the write-up on the website, the national website, Milestat, and it was written as if she pulled out. I was over at the long jump, and it was in the preliminary rounds, and I made sure that her jump would transfer over to the finals, and I knew I knew that her shins were acting up, and she said she was willing to continue, and I said, well, the high jump is starting in about 10, 15 minutes. Let's not push the envelope. You know, you want to do well on the high jump, so your jump will stand for as well as it can do. Lo and behold, the young lady from Churchill High School had a phenomenal jump. And it was great for Tanita, because now she feels re-motivated. There's someone in the region, well, not just in the region, but in the state, that's going to push her once again, because all students love that extra push. You think she would have been down when the young lady jumped 1910? She wasn't. She actually was like, Coach, oh, great. Now we've got another jumper. You know, we're going to go at it this year. I was like, that's what, you know, things work out for a reason.
What a great attitude, too. I mean, that does go back to the comment you made about being very mentally strong to have that type of reaction, because I bet a lot of younger athletes would have seen the downside of it.
Demoralized, right? Exactly. She only went over to the high jump, and then her jump was #1 in the nation. So it didn't hurt her too bad. I think she handled it well.
And I know that another benefit, certainly Tinita brings a lot with the points she brings, but also for the younger athletes, to see an athlete like Tinita, she's talking about how the other athlete at that event was pushing her to be better. How do you think having Tinita on the team impacts your younger athletes who see her and want to work hard to be like the athlete that she has become?
Well, it helps on many levels, not just on performance, but how you carry yourself. And students, the younger athletes, they're very aware, they recognize her. And they, sometimes initially they didn't want to go over and talk to her, because you read about someone, you're like, oh, she's on my team. But it's nice to see that that wall has dropped and they have a comfort level with her. We have a ninth grader, and earlier you asked about ninth graders, Hannah Clark. Hannah's a phenomenal soccer player. But at the meet, she just was looking at Tinita and talking with Tinita. Lo and behold, her time that she ran the mile, she's now qualified for the National Freshman Mile.
Wow.
And she may be going to the Nationals in New York City because this little young lady is another phenom. And sometimes it can spread a good feeling like that. And I think it quietly is working its way through the team. Our team is not as large as we would have liked it, but what I like is it's manageable. And we have people who understand the work involved. I'm an old school person, very traditionalist, and you bring your lunchbox and be ready to work. And if you can't work, then there's going to be an issue.
Well, we've talked a lot about Tanita. You also have some upperclassmen, as well as Tanita, that have had sensational careers at TC Williams and are doing very well this year. I know Erica Weidman is always a threat in the 1,000 meters, and then Mark Grosser, I think, won one of his jumping events at Christopher Newport. So could you talk a little bit about the other upperclassmen on the team who maybe get overlooked a little bit, because when you have an athlete like Tanita, she does get a lot of the press, but brings so much to your program.
Well, Erica Weidman, she just got back this weekend. She was at Virginia Tech for her college visit with the track program there. And that's one of her possibilities that they're looking at her. And it's nice to see things are falling in for that young lady because she's one of our few 5-year athletes on the team. She's been with us since an 8th grader. And she's been on the state level, she's been on the national level. And we know about her. I would just like to see it culminate at the end of the year being a state champion, because if anyone deserves it, it's Erica Weidman. She's given all the blood and sweat for this program. I can't ask more from that young lady. Mark Grosser was a great surprise because he's a baseball kid. He's ran track for 3 years, but he didn't really take to track till last year. And when he took to it, I know he's staying with baseball, but to see his joy and his work effort and ethic just raised to a whole nother level, because he's starting to see, hey, I'm pretty good at this, and it's fun. You know, it's as Tinita points out, it's like a playground. If you have fun at it, it makes it easier. If you make it work, it's going to feel like work.
Again, very, very good attitude about all of this. Now, one thing I also wanted to ask.
And I apologize for interrupting, but because there's a gentleman who was a surprise from the football team named Pierre Espinoza. He had never been on the track team. He decided to come out for track this year. He's ranked 3rd in the region right now in a shot put and top 10 in the state out of nowhere.
Wow.
And he's a starting tackle for the football team, powerful as anything, and he's just a surprise. And I love surprises like that. And I've been kidding with him. I said, I don't know why you're doing track. I said, you should be playing the NFL. Because he's almost as fast as our sprinters. He dared a few of them to run the 55, and this weekend he ran a 7 flat.
Oh my goodness.
And everyone was like, that big guy can't move that fast. And yes, he can.
Well, at least it sounds like that running track will also help him with his other pursuits as well. So it's great off-season training for him.
Yeah, the doors are open now because of that performance this past weekend. I'm sorry.
So in setting goals for your team, do you more set team goals, or do you look at individual athletes and where they are? Because with indoor track, there's so many different events and types of things that your athletes are doing. So is that something you work on with individual athletes, or more just a team dynamic that you set team goals together?
Well, the structure has to be from the top down. Other structures may be from the base up, but in this case, it's from the top down. You have an umbrella effect of, here's the philosophy of the team, here's the philosophy of the coaching staff. So it's actually 2 umbrellas working there. Underneath will be one of returning athletes that we already have an idea who they are and what they can do. Now, how are we going to raise the standards with that respective group? And then you're looking at your second tier one, students who are returnees, but they didn't have the performances they would have liked or you would have liked. So it's preparing a program to fit them. And then there's your bottom level, which is the kid you don't know a thing about, just a true raw rookie starting at the bottom, and you want to challenge him or her, and you do that by week, putting them in different events, letting them get a feel for the sport and have some joy at the sport, and find a way that they'll have some modicum of success, however it might be.
Now, you talked about districts coming up. I know your athletes are going to start to get really motivated with districts, regional, states coming up. Who are some of the teams or athletes in the region that have really stood out to you so far that you have not only been impressed with, but you do think will be big competition for your athletes as you guys move forward in the season?
Well, traditionally, Lake Braddock is always within the running to be the top or in the top two of the schools in the district. West Potomac has put together a very nice program also. And I think one of the surprises this year is the boys program at Annandale. It's a very strong, thorough program from the top to the bottom. And I think they, as they like to say, snuck up on people, and they're doing a phenomenal job there. I think, but Hayfield also, although they're out of the district somewhat now, the Hayfield always is looming. Now they have a couple of very strong sprinters. In South Lakes, they have the Browns.
Vincent Brown.
There's no words for that. Because it seems whatever they put them in, it's golden. And so I think it's a very competitive year. There's no standout team this year, which is the first time. This is my 7th year coaching here. It's the first time there's no standout team who is just head and shoulders above the crowd.
Now, you also coach T.C. Williams' outdoor track team. So how much do you think that indoor track helps the athletes prepare for outdoor track such that maybe they're even more competitive during the outdoor track season?
Well, it's not just being more competitive, it's being more complete. Because many coaches have the belief of the indoor season as a training for the outdoor season.
Right.
And to a certain extent, it can be. Because not all athletes physically are fit for indoor. Something about those tight turns, it just doesn't fit everyone. So I think it really prepares your team for the mindset of being a team, number one, to pushing yourself to other levels that you're not used to, so that when you get to the outdoor aspect or outdoor season, it's an easier transition. And also, there's no school in this region except for Episcopal High School that has an indoor facility.
Right.
So all the schools train on their outdoor track. So also, that's really your home, your outdoor track. So you're so ready for outdoor. It's what you've trained on, it's what you're prepared for, as opposed to if you had an indoor track facility and you trained there. That, I think it'd be a different mindset for your athletes.
Well, and so I've saved this topic for last. I alluded to it at the beginning of the program, but of course, one of the big things that people in the region are talking about are the proposed budget cuts. And indoor track right now is in the Tier 3 plan, and a lot of people think that perhaps it has been taken away from the chopping block. But is that something that is in your athletes' minds? Do they think a lot about that? I know that this has come up several times before. This isn't the first time these discussions have occurred.
Now, across the board, when you're at track meets throughout the season, we've seen the Save Indoor Track T-shirts, including down at Christopher Newport. So this isn't not, although it's taking effect in Fairfax, it's being talked about throughout the state. And when we had our coaches meetings at both the invitationals, off to the side, those were the discussions that were going on, that was being entertained of what's going on up north. You know, do you think this is really going to happen? If it does happen, will this start that ball rolling across the state? And their big argument is, yes, we may not be a revenue-generating sport, but look what this sport does for your school, your community. It does so much. Because when I saw the figures in Fairfax, over 2,500 athletes compete between the schools in indoor track. As a school teacher, I'm a middle school teacher, what are you going to provide them otherwise? Do you want those kids just with free time?
Well, and one thing, you talked a little earlier about the program in Alexandria for the younger athletes before they get up to the high school level. One of the things people have said about gymnastics is that it's a club sport, and so the athletes have other opportunities. And so I was just curious, as someone who definitely knows a lot about the track community, what other opportunities would one say that there would be for indoor track athletes if the program were cut?
It's a difficult thing because in the summer, well, actually the late spring to the summer, there are track open meets that are available usually out toward Loudoun County. Sometimes Langley High School is used in the summer. And some people will venture up into Maryland for some of the all-comers meets, as they call them. If you're a top-level elite athlete, there is AAU or USATF. So there are some opportunities for you, but then you'll get into cost. You have to pay out of the pocket, and it's not inexpensive to do the traveling that's involved. Because this region, although it's rich in track, I don't think it's as rich for the adult athlete or the high schooler. I think if you're a road racer, it's fine in this region. There's road races galore. But if it's for actual track competition, it's a different story. You have to wait until the spring or the summer. And I think you're doing a disservice to the high school population. I ran throughout high school, ran throughout college. The joke in New York, I'm from New York, is I ran for the police. I ran for the PAL track team for 3 summers. Every summer I'd come home and I'd run for police athletic league. And those are boys and girls clubs available in some communities. If you just let it go, I don't see it as being a positive. I do understand budgets need to be done, but you can always look at where else to tweak it.
Well, Coach Edmonds, thank you so much. You have been a phenomenal guest. We really appreciate your take on all of these things in the northern region. And so when we come back, we're going to be joined by Dave Buchenfeld, and we're going to talk about some northern region basketball. Back, we're delighted to be joined by Dave Buchenfeld, one of our favorites on the Fairfax Sports Report. And Dave, you and I have been covering some Northern Region basketball this season. We're going to talk about the Concord District, talk about the Liberty District. So first of all, let's take a look at where the Concord District is right now. We're almost halfway through the district play. So we have the rankings here for you.
No surprise, up on top, you got Chantilly and Westfield, 2 of the top teams in the Northern Region. We're going to be talking quite a bit about them. They had an epic game last Friday that we had a chance to see. Chantilly, a perfect 6-0 in district play, 13-1 overall. Westfield, their only loss came on Friday to Chantilly on a buzzer beater. They're 4-1 in the district, 12-2 overall. Herndon, 4-1 in the district as well. Their only loss also to Chantilly. They're only 7-6 overall, however. Then you have Centerville at 2-3 and 6-8. Fairfax and Robinson are both 1-4 in the district. And you have Oakton down there. We talked about Chris Coyer. Hopefully he can help them get things back on track, but they're currently winless in district play.
Well, Dave, I think you said it best when you said that this was really an epic matchup between Westfield and Chantilly this past Friday night. So I know you were there. What were your impressions of the game and how both of these two teams are playing at this juncture in the season?
Well, we knew coming in that they were going to be, 2 of the best teams, definitely in the Concord District, possibly in the Northern Region, and they didn't let us down. It was a back and forth game. Westfield went up in the first quarter. Chantilly came back in the second quarter. Westfield went back up in the third quarter. Chantilly came back and hit the buzzer-beating shot to win the game at the end. But both teams are solid. Chantilly has maybe 9 or 10 guys that can contribute. Very well-balanced team. And Coach Ewell for Westfield actually admitted to me before the game, he said, Chantilly is the best team in the region, in his opinion, but they're not unbeatable. And they almost proved it, weren't able to quite pull out the win, but they showed that they do have a few chinks in their armor.
And certainly one of the stories, too, is that Chantilly was without Adam Fritty, who is one of their top players. He's been out for about 30 days now. He's been on that suspension. So they'll be even stronger, I think, when he gets back. And then you have to talk about John Manning, who everyone in the region's been talking about for so long. Last year as a freshman, he was getting acclimated to playing at the high school level. But what were your impressions of him and how he's progressed during the offseason to this season?
Well, they always say you can't teach height, and he's got plenty of it. He's 6'10", and he really has shown a lot of improvement in his sophomore year. Last year, he would affect things on the defensive end with block shots, things like that, but he would really get pushed around a little bit offensively, and Coach Smith said before the game he's really worked hard to bulk up a little bit. He keeps his spot down in the post more often, worked on some of his moves down there, and he had a great first half, shut down a little bit in the second half offensively, but still obviously was there rebounding and defensively. Ended up with 12 points, right around his average on the season so far, but he definitely looks like a more complete player this year than he was last season.
And another story was Westfield. I mean, they lost 7 of their top 8 athletes from last year. They lost Mo Hubbard, they lost Brian Kennedy, they lost Jamie Richardson, but they are definitely in the mix in the Concord District. And one of the things, at least I've heard, even though I haven't gotten the chance to, I've seen them play once, is that their defense is really strong. What was your impression of their defense? I think they're second in the region with fewest points allowed.
Their defense was great, no doubt about it. And actually losing Mo and John Gaston down low actually turned out to be a blessing in disguise. Chris Kearney has really stepped up, 6'7" senior for them. Kind of got lost in the shuffle the last couple of seasons with those guys. Didn't really get to play a whole lot. And Coach Ewell admitted, he should have played him a little bit more given how he's playing so far this season. But he said it kind of fueled his fire a little bit, and he's really come out strong this season. I saw him earlier against Lake Braddock. He really dominated that game. And again, he had 19 points against Chantilly on Friday night. He really knows how to play down low and is definitely one of their best players this season.
And I talked about the players that they lost. They also gained Jordan Anderson. We talked about him so much during the football season. What were your impressions of him as a player? I know looking at the box score, he had 2 points, but he's a very fast athlete. He added so much to the football field. He's very aggressive. What were your thoughts about him?
He just is an athlete, like you said. He's probably the best athlete on their team, in my opinion. Only had the 2 points, but he has a lot of slashing moves to the basket. Obviously great on the defensive end, helps on that side as well. But he's definitely one of the best athletes in the Concord District.
Well, we've been talking about this game. We have some highlights to show you of this matchup, and of course you'll get to see the big shot. But Dave, if you want to go ahead and start taking us through it.
Yep, there's Manning blocking Kearney's shot on the defensive end. Westfield had some nice outside shooting as well. Here's Manning, one of his he loved that baby jump hook with the left hand. Seemed like Kearney kind of got smart and was taking that away in the second half and kind of shut him down. You see Kearney driving to the hole, and then with a nice dish out for the 3. Another great play down low. Chantilly has some great low post players. There you see Justin May with 2 of his 14 points in the game. He actually didn't start the defending Concord Player of the Year, been battling some hamstring and knee injuries, but he turned it on strong in the second half. And there another great follow by him, and then Manning cleaned it up off the glass. Great shot from the outside there.
Shot from the corner there. Is that Marcellus Hawley? I couldn't see the number.
I believe it was, and then a great move. That was an unbelievable up and under move by Kearney there. May drained a 3-pointer to get them back in the game. There's Jordan Anderson driving, but he got rejected by Manning.
Big battle there, Westfield. You see the offensive rebound. Chris Kearney, always so strong.
There he goes again. Again, he had a game-high 19 points.
When we saw him play at the Bulldog Bash, he was the most valuable player of that tournament. I completely agree with you, Dave, that he's certainly come into his own this year for Westfield and has become quite the star for the Bulldogs.
Really gets the roll on that one. There goes Jordan Anderson for his 2 points of the game.
And certainly one of the most interesting things about this Chantilly club is Justin May's a senior, but they have a lot of underclassmen. They're this good this year.
And there's the game-winning shot right there, Matt DeWitt. Unbelievable play on his part. Got the spot-up 3 in the corner to win the game there. Look at the points. Justin May, as we said, led the team with 14 points, even though he didn't start in this game. Manning had 10 of his 12 in the first half to help them take a halftime lead. Ended up with 12 points. And Matt DeWitt, who hit that game-winning 3-pointer, finished with 8 points. Chris Kearney, as we already said, 19 points for Westfield. And Peter Scanlon, one of the best shooters in the Concord District, chipped in with 10.
And now we're going to show you our post-game interview. Got to talk with Jim Smith, the victorious Chantilly head coach.
Westfield played extremely well tonight, and we were just fortunate to have the last shot. If they'd had the last shot of the game, they may very well have won it. But I was really proud of a lot of our kids. We got good contributions. Matt obviously hit the big shot. The young man who made the pass to Matt, Shane Gabor, is our backup point guard. He came in when Devin Ballum, our starter, was hurt, and had a great first quarter and found Matt in the corner. And you know, that's team basketball. That's what it's all about.
Now, Dave, I think one thing, too, about Chantilly is last year they had such a disappointing season in terms of the fact that they won 21 of their first 23 games, but then they lose the district tournament, they lose in the first round of the region tournament. How much of that do you think is a factor motivating them this season? They've gotten off to a very quick start again, but they've seen what can happen once you get into the postseason.
I'm sure it's definitely on their mind, and it will be as we get later on into the season, but I don't think they'll be thinking about it too much. This is a much different team than they had last year. Obviously, you still have Justin May, but they're getting a lot of contributions from different players. Like I said before, you know, Coach Smith said they have 9 or 10 guys that can contribute on any given night. One thing to look for, though, is they are starting 3 sophomores on this team, so they are a little bit inexperienced. And Coach Smith was a little worried heading into that game on Friday how those young players would react to the raucous atmosphere you saw there over at Westfield. Obviously, one of the most difficult places to play. Westfield doesn't lose many games on its home court. So he was pretty happy at the end of the game, the way that they all responded, and were able to pull out that hard-fought victory.
Well, and I have been really impressed with their bench. I think something very interesting is that in their holiday tournament, one of their bench players was actually on the all-tournament team. I think it was Johnerton made the all-tournament team, and Coach Smith said after that tournament that wasn't the first time that that's happened at Chantilly. They like to make good use of their bench. They're a very deep team, which will be very helpful for them in the postseason.
Yeah, and Howerton was one of those guys I was talking about playing down low. He had some big buckets. I think he ended up with 6 or 8 points in that game. But some of his shots were really big when Westfield was threatening to blow that game open. He had a couple of big buckets down low to keep them in that ball game, and he'll certainly help them down the road.
So Chantilly definitely at the top right now in the Concord district, but we'll have to go back through the district playing those teams again. So we'll see where they are when the regular season ends. So we've talked a little bit about the Concord district. Now I want to move over to another district, the Liberty district, and show you where the teams stand right now.
Yeah, a little bit of a surprise in the Liberty District, kind of shaken up from the way things have been the last couple of seasons. You got South Lake sitting on top right now with a 5-1 record in the district. Only 9-5 overall, though. You see, none of these teams are really have a great overall record right now. Madison, who we're going to talk about in a minute, they're 4-2 in the district, 8-4 overall. Woodson, surprisingly, 4-2 in the district and 8-6 overall. They're without Max Lennox, the point guard. He hurt his knee, most likely going to miss the whole season. But they have, Steven Stepka and all those guys keeping them in the hunt. Stonebridge has also been a pretty big surprise. They've been 4-3 in the district, only 6-9 overall, as you can see. Jefferson, not really known for their basketball team, having a great season for them, 3-4 and 5-9. Then you get to Langley. Obviously everybody thinks of Ryan Davenport. He's no longer there. Struggling a little bit right now at 2-4, but 9-5 overall. And then you look at Marshall, 2-4 and 3-11. And McLean lost defending region player of the year, Tarek Amori. They're only 1-5 in district play and just 4-9 overall right now.
And Dave, you and I got to see that McLean team play earlier in the season when they played Madison, and they lost so much from last year, but Madison lost a lot as well. What were your impressions of Madison? They only have one returning starter. They have Omi Ogolo back, but the big news for them is Will Clarkson.
Yeah, I was actually very impressed with Madison, the way they played. I wasn't expecting a whole lot out of them. They ended up winning by 12 points in that game. It was a little bit closer than that for most of the game. They pulled away a little at the end. But as you said, they lost pretty much everybody except for Omi Ogolo. He was the one returning starter, but he's been banged up for most of the season. Right. Still not 100%, and you could see it in that game. He had off-season hip surgery, missed the first couple of games of this season. Only had 1 point, I think, heading into the fourth quarter of that game. Ended up with 9 at the end, but he's just not the same scorer that he was before. But Coach Kublank said, he still does it on the defensive end and with the leadership role on that team. But Will Clarkson has been a complete surprise. Coach Kublank was joking with me before the game, saying, Will was, averaging just a couple minutes a game last season. His number one role was to play hard against the first team in practice every day. But he's really, everybody knows him from the football team, but he's just kind of exploded onto the scene. We talked about 2 great big men in the Concord district, but Will Clarkson is right up there with anybody in the northern region when it comes to, post players, averaging just under 20 points a game. He had 25 in that game against McLean. He just has so many moves. He can step out and hit the 3 if he needs to. Very versatile player, and defensively he had a number of block shots and always had his hand up there, getting in people's way and altering people's shots down low. Definitely their MVP so far this season.
Well, and I got to talk with Coach Kublank before the game, and the big thing he said about Clarkson is that he is a charge-taking machine as well, so he really likes to play defense, but does very well on the offensive end. I checked his stats today. He's had 250 points around that on the season so far, and shooting about 75% from the free throw line, which is very important as well. He has the ball so much, he gets fouled a lot. Yeah,
you don't see many big men like that can drill their free throws, but he has a very nice stroke. Like I said, he can hit the three-pointer, so if you can hit the three-pointer, you should be able to hit your free throws. And, I said he blocked shots, but he does. I think he had at least 2 or 3 charges taken in that game against McLean. He's very quick on his feet. He's able to slide in front of the guys, drive into the hole, and take those charges. He's definitely the key to their team so far this season.
And it seems like one big thing that always happens in the region is that seniors graduate and you think that teams are not going to have as good of a season, but then all these transfers come in and you never know what's going to happen with the teams. And so Trevor Winslow is a transfer that's coming to Madison. And I felt like during the Madison-McLean game, he had a really strong game and really helped his team a lot. I think he's been a huge asset.
Oh, definitely. And, when you lose as much as they did, every little bit helps. And especially with Omi not playing 100%, he definitely stepped up in that game. I'm not sure what he's averaging on the season right now, but he definitely had a big performance that night.
Well, the big thing about Madison, though, that I really noticed during that game was that they're a half-court team, and McLean sped them up a little bit, and that was something that I talked with Coach Kublank about at halftime. They struggled with that. They tried to get the tempo back at their level. Then during the fourth quarter, they were able to do that a bit more, which helped them get the win.
Yeah, and they're not only a half-court team offensively, but they really like to be half-court defensively. Stress to me, taking smart shots so they're able to get back and set. They're always hard-nosed, man-to-man defense, in your face, in your jersey, not letting you go where you want to go. And so when they take, ill-advised shots and not able to get back on the defensive end, really messes things up for them. So when they play a nice, slow half-court game, it really works to their advantage. When you look at McLean, they loved to play a half-court game last year when they had Tark, averaging 20 points, 10 rebounds a game. But without him, they don't really, Coach Roller was saying they don't really have a go-to guy this year, so they need to try and speed it up, use the athleticism and quickness that they have, push the ball, pressure defense, get teams out of what they like to do and speed the tempo up, like you said, especially against a team like Madison who likes to slow things down. It worked for most of the game against Madison that time, but they just weren't able to sustain it at the end. Madison hit a big three-pointer at the end of the third quarter that gave them the lead heading into the fourth, and pretty much just all unraveled from there for McLean.
And of course, McLean did lose Amory. Like, that was a huge loss for them. But two players that I felt like have really stepped up for them. First of all, Peter Brosnan. He was, I think, their offensive leader during the game. And then Grayson Dahl is someone that they really rely on for defense, which is not surprising. People in the region very familiar with the fact that he's an all-district lacrosse defender. I think we have some numbers up here to show you what the box score looked like at the end of this game.
Yep, you look there, we said Will Clarkson, 25 points to lead all scorers. Trevor Winslow, how you said, big game for them, 17 points. Omi ended up with 9, but like I said, he only had 1 point heading into the fourth quarter, hit a few free throws and a couple of easy baskets on fast breaks, if I remember correctly, in the fourth quarter. McLean, you mentioned Peter Brosnan, 14 points to lead McLean. He's their point guard, bringing the ball up the court. Had a couple of three-pointers, if I remember correctly. Grayson Dahl and Brad Mason both had 8 points apiece.
So we saw this McLean team play. We're a little familiar with them. Of course, our game of the week this week is going to be Langley versus McLean. That's always a huge game. They get huge numbers out for that game. So, Dave, we've seen McLean play. We haven't seen Langley play. And as you mentioned when you were going through the standings, it's been a bit of a surprise this year. They have 5 seniors starting. They have Barrett Hunter, Derek Baker, Danny Pritchett, Jack McClendon, and then Thomas Cody, all back. But they've struggled a little bit.
I honestly have no explanation, having not seen them play it. I look forward to seeing that game on Friday. But especially, Derek Baker really started to come on at the end of last season. Thought he was going to be a big leader for them. I'm sure he is. It's just the team hasn't seemed to come together as well as Coach Hess has wanted them to. Obviously, losing Ryan Davenport, a player of his stature, is going to be tough. I forget how many points he averaged last year, but it was up there. And, great shooter, great defender, great leader on that team. So it's tough to replace somebody like that. But with the number of seniors they have on the team and the coaching that Coach Hess does, he's one of the best in the region. I'm sure they're going to turn it around. I wouldn't be surprised if they turn it around on Friday against McLean. Big rivalry game there, crosstown rivals. I'm sure the big crowd is going to be there for that one. It always is a good one.
Well, and you bring up a great point with Ryan Davenport. I mean, he had this quality about him that does not show up in the box score. He hustled so hard. He had so much heart, and so that is a huge loss for them. One thing that I've heard Travis Hess say is that he feels like his team gets off to very slow starts in games, so it'll be very interesting to see whether they get off to a quicker start against McLean. But I have to agree with you, Dave. I think that they're going to turn it around and really challenge and contend for the Liberty District as the season progresses.
Yeah, and with a shooter like Ryan Davenport, last season they could have slow starts and then he would hit 5 3-pointers in the second half and all of a sudden they win the ball game. But without that we talked about it with McLean as well. without that explosive go-to scorer that they had last season, they can't afford to fall in too big a hole. So we'll have to keep an eye out on that on Friday.
Well, Dave, thank you so much for joining us. We always appreciate your insights.
Sure.
And so when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about Northern Region basketball and also talk a little bit about gymnastics. Welcome back. We're going to take a little bit of a break from Northern Region boys basketball right now to talk about one of the other winter sports. We'll go back into the Patriot District and the National District in just a little bit. But first, I want to talk a little bit about gymnastics, and certainly I alluded to it earlier in the program. It is one of the sports that has been threatened to be cut from the program. Recently, there was a huge 6-team meet you see on January 15th that featured some of the best teams in the region. Chantilly, always strong, came up huge. 144.425 on the day. One of their best athletes, Ellie Tara, having a great season so far for Chantilly. She finished second all around at that 6-team meet. Now, Lake Braddock finishing second, 134.825. People in the region know that this is a storied Lake Braddock gymnastics program. They have been strong for quite some time, won several state championships, and of course, Justin Spring, the Olympian, went to Lake Braddock. They always come out strong. They were led by Emily Perillo and a freshman, Caitlin Liberatore. Lake Braddock won the Patriot District last year, so a lot of people think that they will be the team that will be the strongest contender this year. Herndon in third place at that meet, and Maria Hayden was the top all-around gymnast. She has been strong all season so far, and certainly strong contender as the season continues. Falls Church in fourth place, and then W.T. Woodson, they're led by Adrienne Kravitz. She struggled a little bit at that meet, but very strong gymnast. Will certainly look to see her improve and get even better as the season goes on. And then Annandale finishing in sixth place at that meet. Now, again, a lot of the explanation for why gymnastics may be the team to go is that it only includes around 125 to 200 athletes. There hasn't been a number given so far as to what the exact number is, and that a lot of those athletes have the opportunity to compete on the club level. And perhaps one of the reasons that the participation numbers aren't higher is because there are club opportunities available for those athletes, but the Northern Region gymnastics programs have been strong for so long, and so certainly would be very sad if they ended up being cut in the budget plan for 2010. We'll keep you posted on what happens with that. Again, they're having one of those public hearings tonight, and as soon as we have latest news, we'll give it to you on the program. Now, let's go back into some Northern Region basketball. We've talked about the Concord District. We've talked about the Liberty District. Let's talk a little bit about the Patriot District, which is, in my opinion, one of the strongest districts this year. First, you see Hayfield there sitting on top, 6-0 in the district, 12-2 overall. And then T.C. Williams also perfect in the district. But of course, the big matchup tonight, if I weren't here in the studio, I would want to be at the Hayfield T.C. Williams game. They are battling it out tonight for sole possession of first place in the Patriot District. Lake Braddock there at 3-3, 9-4 overall. Good numbers for them. They lost some athletes, but Dominic Morris still very strong. Annandale at 3-3, 5-8. Then you see Lee also 3-3 and 6-5 on the season. And then the last three, South County, West Springfield, and West Potomac. But let's talk a little bit about these Patriot District teams. One of the ones I'm most excited about is this Hayfield team. They're a very exciting team to watch. They're led by TJ Wilson, who's getting a lot of press throughout the region. He has had some explosive dunks so far on the season. Hayfield did struggle a little bit during their holiday tournament, but they were missing a couple of their players due to the holidays. Brandon Winbush was gone, and Laurent Newsom was out of town. Newsom is also a player that can do some pretty amazing dunks. So Hayfield, certainly a team that you might want to check out this year. It's always a fun game to see. And as I said, they're matching up with T.C. Williams tonight, and T.C. Williams, as most people in the region know, is the defending 3A state champion, but they lost a lot of talent off of that team. They lost Travis Berry, of course they lost Anthony Winbush, and then Ivan Thomas, their coach, is also gone, so they lost a lot off of that team. Julian King has taken over for the Titans, and he does have some talent back in Edward Jenkins. Jenkins, of course, was one of the players who contributed a great deal to that T.C. Williams state championship team team, and they also benefited from getting a transfer this year. Billy Rowland has transferred from Bishop Ireton, and he has been huge for the Titans so far. Now, one of the games that people are always talking about in the region is, of course, the Montrose Christian TC Williams matchup. And unfortunately, that game did not go how TC Williams had hoped that it would go this year. They got off to a very sluggish start in that game and were never able to overcome the deficit. But of course, that's always a big opportunity for them. I think about 2,000 people attended that game, so it was a very widely attended game, giving them a lot of good experience. And so TC Williams, always going to be at the top of the mix, always a team to talk about. And to talk about one other team in the Patriot District that certainly you should keep your eyes on is Lake Braddock. Now, Dominic Mora is an athlete in the region that is sensational. He's averaging over 30 points per game. I think he's the leading scorer right now amongst the athletes in the Northern region. And one statistic of his, which I find exceptionally impressive, is that on the season so far, he has been to the free throw line over 200 times. One of his favorite things to do, a very good skill that he has, is to draw fouls, and he has really made that pay off for his team. He's shooting around 75% from the free throw line, and that's such an important thing because it's not only scoring points for Lake Braddock, but it's getting the other team in foul trouble. And so Dominic Mora, I'm a little surprised that he's not getting more interest from Division III schools or Division II, Division I. He's such a great athlete, but he's had tepid interest so far. But certainly I think he's a player that you should keep watching and keep rooting for because he has really come up strong for Lake Braddock so far. Now, one game that has been a big game in the Patriot District, Hayfield West Potomac. You see what TJ Wilson did in that game. He had 32 points, which was a career high for Wilson. His last 3 games, the numbers he's been putting up have been very impressive. Against Annandale, he had 18 points. Against Lee, he had 28 points. And on the season, 235 points, 57.9% from the free throw line. So again, TJ Wilson, he's a very exciting athlete to watch, one of my favorites to watch in the region. Finally, let's talk a little bit about the National District, which a lot of people in the region are saying could be the most exciting district in the region this year, and I'll tell you why in just a minute. But first of all, let's take a look at the standings. Mount Vernon sitting in the sole top spot, 5-0, 10-4 overall, and they have been the surprise of the entire region, playing so strong right now for Coach Alfonso Smith. Yorktown at 4-1, 8-7 overall. Then Stuart, 3-2, 11-2 overall. People have been very impressed with how this Stuart program has turned around in the past 2 years with head coach Tony Harris. Now Wakefield at 3-2 and 11-4. Edison having a little bit of an off year, 1-4, 3-12. Washington and Lee, 1-4, 2-12. Falls Church, 1-5, 3-12. So you see where the National District is standing right now. Now, as I said, this Mount Vernon team has been so impressive so far. They won their holiday tournament. They just had a big game against Stuart, who, along with Wakefield, is probably the other team that's the class of the district. You see the numbers there. They defeated them by 2 points, a very close game, and it was the sophomore, Jesse Conadu, with 17 points, as well as Skylar Jones with 16 points, leading Mount Vernon. You see for Stuart, Raymond Watson had 19 points. And Coach Alfonso Smith has a problem that a lot of coaches in the region would probably like to have because he has 4 guards, any of which could start. He's actually made the decision to start the 2 underclassmen. The 2 seniors are coming off of the bench, but it's worked very well for his program so far, and they have so much talent. That's just the guards, but then Robert Coleman, who was the MVP of their holiday tournament, and Skylar Jones has been very impressive on the inside so far. So there's so much talent over at Mount Vernon. You should definitely keep a lookout for them because I think they could stir some things up as we approach the region tournament. Now in Stuart also, I talked a little bit about them. And that is a program where a lot of people have felt like it struggled for so long. But now that Tony Harris has taken over, in his past 2 years, he's had 25 wins. He's got all of his athletes back, so Stuart also could be a contender in the National District. We're going to take one more break, and when we come back, we'll talk a little bit about girls basketball before we go. Welcome back. So we've talked about indoor track, we've talked about gymnastics, and we've talked about boys basketball. But before we go, we just want to talk a little bit about girls basketball in the region. And the district that I have found the most fascinating so far is the Patriot District. So many teams that could compete for the district crown this year. TC Williams on top, of course, led by the incomparable Tiara Ruffin-Pratt, 5-0 in the district, 9-4 overall. Then West Springfield at 5-1, 12-2, and then you see Lee, South County, two other teams that I really think could shake some things up in the Patriot District. Then the last four, Hayfield, Annandale, Lake Braddock, and West Potomac. They're closing out for the Patriot District. And one of the biggest games we've had over the past few weeks in the Patriot District has been a matchup between West Springfield and South County. And there you see West Springfield's freshman phenoms had a very good effort against South County. April Robinson, one of the freshmen, had 12 points. Samantha Landers, 10 points. And Logan Battle, 9 points. And then talking about underclassmen who are phenomenal, South County's Simone Otway, who's a sophomore, 19 points, 14 rebounds, a very great effort from Simone. And one thing about Simone's effort as well, she was in foul trouble for most of that game. She picked up her third foul very early in the third quarter, and so she had to sit for a while, and then she fouled out in the fourth quarter. So her numbers may have even been higher had she not been in the foul trouble. And you no doubt remember me talking about her during volleyball season because she was a star on the volleyball court. Now she's also being a star for her South County basketball team. But let's talk a little bit more about West Springfield because I am so excited about this team. They have the best of both worlds, so to speak, because on the one hand, they have these two freshmen, April Robinson and Logan Battle, and then they have two seniors, Samantha Landers and Pui Sham, who have been there leading this West Springfield team. And I think they really have a good shot at the Patriot District, which some people may be surprised about because TC Williams always strong and T.R. Ruffin-Pratt certainly the best player in the region. I think most people would agree with that. But West Springfield has really been putting up some good numbers. I think they're really going to challenge this TC Williams team. But let me talk a little bit about TC Williams and some of the other teams in the Patriot District before we go. So of course, TC Williams has Tiara Ruffin-Pratt. She recently committed to go to UNC Chapel Hill next year and recently scored her 2,000th point in a game. So she joins that very elite club of athletes in the region who have reached that very amazing accomplishment. And Ruffin-Pratt is not the only standout for TC Williams. Of course, they also have Monica Fikes as well as Kalia Boston. So a lot of talent on that TC Williams team. And then finally, the other team that I would certainly keep a watch for in the Patriot District is Lee. They lost Christine Mile to an ACL injury, but they're the defending champions, so you can't count them out. All right, well, that is our mad dash through the region today. Thank you for joining us. And before we go, again, we want to remind you that we're on the web. You can visit our website at www.fairfaxsportsnetwork.com. There you see it there. And of course, we want to thank the folks that help make this show possible, our good friends at CCI Screen Printing, for all of your screen printing needs. All right, well, that is it for this week, but please be sure to join us next time.
Wow.